Good evening, my name is Joel Finkelstein. I'm the director of the Network Contagion Research Institute. We're an organization that uses artificial intelligence and machine learning to try to understand what's happening on social media at a massive scale. We use quantitative methods to understand the contagions that occur with bad ideas within and between web communities and how those increasingly are influencing the real world. So the talk that I'm here to give you today is about methods to monitor, combat, and expose anti-Semitism as it's growing on social media. And this is becoming an increasingly large problem in this medium. Now, the story that we are telling starts really back in 2018, when we began using these approaches to understand what was happening with hate and malicious deceit on web communities. And it started with some extremist communities, 4chan, Gab, some that most of you are probably blessed to have never heard of. These are communities with millions of members, and they espouse really bad ideas about white supremacy, anti-Semitism, using code words and memes. In September of 2018, we noticed these communities, and using our tools, we diagnosed what they were like. We explored their coded language, their strange dreams of white supremacist control and genocide. And we published a report in the Washington Post warning that we were witnessing a massive spillout of white supremacy and anti-Semitism in these communities. And we were noticing a worrying trend in our report between real-world activity mirroring this kind of online rhetoric. We saw that in consecutive real-world events, the election, the inauguration, and then Charlottesville, our tools detected massive changes in the way that these large communities of hateful individuals were speaking. Increases in identity politics, blame towards Jews and African Americans and other minorities. And a month later, Pittsburgh happened. The attack at Pittsburgh actually came from one of the communities that we were studying, Gab. It was motivated by the ideas we were referring to in the Washington Post mere weeks before the attack occurred, talking about this worrying mirroring between these online communities. And now we were watching terror attacks, where attackers were preparing their memes at the same time that they're preparing their attacks. Fast forward about a month later, and we noticed that one of the memes that we saw, this Pepe the Frog character, the frog appeared on this strange military badge. And we immediately knew that what we were witnessing was a very dangerous evolution. Individuals going from hotbeds where terrible ideas and dangerous ideologies were being hotboxed and emerging into the real world. Now we were seeing entire militias that were emerging on social media, on Facebook, on Twitter, on Reddit. The militia was called the Boogaloo. It's an apocalyptic militia cult seeking an Armageddon and a battle, an insurgency against law enforcement officials and policymakers. It turns out that there's elements of racial war that are attached to this idea, and that the plan across the entire militia is to use memes and code words to foment violence across the entire country. In March, we warned about this in a story that was at the top of NBC News, warning of imminent attacks from this group based on what we had seen in Pittsburgh that were imminent towards law enforcement, towards civilians. Fast forward a month after that, and we saw these groups showing up everywhere at quarantine. Instead of brown shirts, they were wearing Hawaiian shirts. But the accelerationist flair, the racial overtones, the ideas of accelerating a massive war, those were familiar enough. And soon we saw this group not just appearing across these rallies, but storming government buildings and then launching numerous lethal terror attacks against law enforcement. Our tools, it turned out, were capable of threat analysis and landscape prediction. Only a month after that, the NCRI issued a report on what we called network-enabled anarchy. We saw the rise of anarchist and communist militia groups all across Twitter, all across Reddit, and on Facebook again. The networks that we noticed were launching their own sets of code words and memes, this time dehumanizing police and political opponents. They were calling for a revolution, just like the Boogaloo. They were using memes to organize it, just like the Boogaloo. And we found that they were using these memes to organize riots in 5 major US cities, Richmond, Oakland, Eugene, Seattle, and Portland, simultaneously, coordinating them online with chilling new abilities that social media was offering these accelerationist groups, burning down police precincts, throwing explosive at the sides of police buildings, throwing Molotov cocktails into cars loaded with officers. We noticed a massive contagion inside of web communities similar to Gabs and 4chans on the right, but this time on the left. And they had revolutionary ideas, explicitly violent ideas, and stockpiling ammunition and preparing for an all-out war. Okay, what's happening here? It would appear that very bad ideologies from the 1900s are returning. This time they're returning on social media, and they're disguising themselves with cartoonish jokes, code words, and glorification of genocidal dictators as a joke. They're focused on the hatred of Jews as immigrants, worried about a white replacement where Jews will come in as immigrants, and they will replace all white people with ethnic people of color. On the other side, you have the resurgence of other bad ideas from the 1900s. These too are glorifying genocidal dictators with inside jokes. And they're talking about Jews replacing people of color, this time using a nation. That's the opposite of the first myth, except it's completely inverted and identical otherwise. You have other pockets of people getting in on this action and using social media. The Black Hebrew Israelites, with the recent violence in the Northeastern Corridor against Jewish life, motivated by the idea, again, that Jews are replacing them, and using memes and cartoonish code words all across social media in similar ways. And finally, you have grievances in the Middle East that are also promoting their own ideas of replacement. And they're preparing their memes at the same time they prepare their rocket attacks. All right, this is a pandemic. In tandem with COVID-19 and the massive social instability that has followed in its wake, a pandemic of anti-Semitic memes and ideas are circulating all over the world. They're disguised in the same way through code words and inside jokes as cartoons and images, hotboxed inside of web communities that target individual users with ads that pull them into tribal communities. Those communities are pulling out conspiracy theories to organize their grievances. These conspiracy theories are filled with code words and images. We see these causing riots and real-world events that are excused because of the conspiracies and cause real-world episodes of violence. The violence we see in our own tools is extremely powerful for producing a massive cascade of images and of code words across these social media communities. And finally, this is a kind of ecosystem that is very rich for disruption by state actors who seek to inject all of these things sporadically into such a toxic mixture. In that environment, our media, our leadership are incapable of having honest conversations with us, because every single side is weaponizing language with increasingly coded words that mean violence, and putting political violence back on the menu in ways that haven't been seen since the 1900s. So what can we do about this? We developed a platform that allows us to go through these communities rapidly and dissect what's in them at a massive scale. And what does this allow? It allows us to dissect the code words. We can see what the ethnic disgust is. We can see what the cryptic disguise is towards Jews, what the global control accusations are made of, and how they're being set out as supernatural forms of evil and dominance. Okay? We can see when the riots are happening and the escalating violence in the language that's preceding them. We can see when the terror attacks are ensuing and when the code words are coming forward. We can see them populating the networks that are filled with the radicals that are emerging from them to engage in acts of stochastic terror in the real world. And we can capture the images using machine learning analysis as well. We can capture the conspiracy theories. We can see them playing out across all these communities simultaneously, being shared between them rapidly. And we can see the state actors using those same tools in real time, injecting anti-Semitic speech into the communities during terror attacks like Charlottesville or during the election itself. The only question now is, will we be aware of this? Will we look at this straight? Will we look at this in the eye? And will we deal with this as both for the sake of the Jewish people and for the sake of our democracies everywhere.